which woodworking glue shrinks the least? Well, I did a test and the results might surprise you. But while you're here, please boop the old like button because it helps the channel, you know. Well, yesterday I grabbed this piece of plywood and I decided to drill 3 recesses in that piece of plywood using this Forstner bit. Happens to be a 1/2 inch Forstner bit. And the holes are 5mm deep, each of them. I flush filled each of those holes with glue. 3 different glues. One was the Cascamite. One was a D3 PVA. The other one was a D4 PU glue, a polyurethane glue. Well, I'll tell you what, this really surprised me. Now, I've used a lot of glues in my time as being a woodworker, that I have, and it's always been Cascamite has been my go-to glue. This one here, it's a powder resin wood glue. Fantastic stuff. Now, I've done tests regarding cutting through the joints to see if there's any shrinkage in the joint and stuff like that. And the Cascamite has always been, well, my best option, especially if I compared it to like a PVA. Well, I haven't used this PVA before until yesterday when I done this test, and I'm really surprised. Not just at this D3, but also I'm very surprised at this PU glue as well. And I'm a little bit disappointed at my Cascamite because it's not what I'm used to. Now, the test might not reflect perfectly a joint situation, because a joint situation, you're not talking about an exposed environment, and your joints should be reasonably tight anyway. And I have done tests where the joints were loose, and the Cascamite has always been the best. But when I've done this recess test, as you can see here, let's put that way up. The words are the right way up. As you can see here, I've done my test, and the results, well, they weren't as I expected. I expected the PU glue to be a bit messy, as you can see. In that test, what I did yesterday, so it's been 24 hours since I did this, and I filled each of these holes flush. I used this blade here and I scraped them flush with the top, so each glue was only flush with the top of the ply. And as you can see, the PU glue, which is the middle one there, which is this one here, the D4, PU D4 glue, which is a polyurethane glue, and it's very much like the foam they use to put around windows and what have you, or block holes, you know, the squirty foam, it all expands and make a right mess everywhere. Well, this is no exception. My bench is covered in goo. Let me just show you that. There, it's, this stuff is so it can be really messy. So you need to bear that in mind when you're using PU glues. And this is no exception. But there are things you can do. If you're worrying about squeeze out, in this case it's like, I don't know, blowout, I suppose. It's not really squeeze out, the state of that. But, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. So bear with us. But you can control it to the degree. Let's say, for instance, you're putting 4 biters together, or you're putting a panel door together, and you don't want any glue bleed out in the internal corners. Well, then what you can do is you can use a piece of caulk, like so, a little tiny bit of caulk on the inside edges of your joint, and what will happen is, because the glue will find its squeeze out for the least, how would you say it? Least resistance, that's it, least resistance. So if you create some resistance by putting some caulk in, you can get adhesive type caulks and stuff like that as well. And what happens is that glue will go outwards instead of inwards where your panel is, which you might not want, because the cleaning up this stuff is not that easy. It's a bit messy, and it can create a lot of residue. You end up sanding it back, and all. Anyway, so you do need to have a bit of experience with it, and you'll get that in time. So just bear it in mind. Now, the other thing I've learnt with it is when you're putting a joint together, you need to make sure you coat it thinly, relatively thinly, just covering it on each surface, because it'll expand into the space. But if it's already started expanding, it might lose some of its tackiness, and the opposing surface, it might be dry. So not dry, but it won't be as sticky as it was, if you know what I mean. So if you do all surfaces, the surfaces will meet together, and you'll have the same material, a little bond in the joint if you've got a gappy joint. For bad woodworkers, inexperienced woodworkers, that was a bit nasty. No, you're not going to see bad woodwork, you just ain't got there yet. You aren't producing tight joints just yet. Now, this test did surprise me, because here's my 3 little holes, as you can see. This one's blown out to God knows how much. Let's have a look. That is about, well, it's got some kind of wart growing on the top of here of around 20 millimetres. Yeah, past the surface. Now, is that good for a joint? Well, if you've got nowhere for it to go, it's going to squeeze up tight in that joint, I imagine. I'm going to do a cut from test of this with a mortise and tenon joint, I think. It'll be a good idea. But remember, anything that expands, I mean, it's expanding because it's producing gas and blowing up like a bit of foam. And what's the foam got in it? It's got air. And this has got air in it. So, I've got my doubts if it'd be good for joints. Because where there's air, it can compress and squeeze down. It's quite firm, don't be wrong, it's quite firm. And if you're in a reasonable joint, well, then it'd be brilliant. Because you've definitely filled any little voids in the joint, but also there's no shrinkage, but I think it'd work really well in a joint, providing they're good joints. But if you've got really gappy joints, you might end up with compression in the joint, because this stuff, like I say, is soft. So I could put it in a vise or have you, or maybe G-clamp. I've got one close by. No, I haven't. Or you could put that in a clamp and that's probably squeeze right down, as you can see. That's, yeah. All right, so the other two glues. Now, considering that the PU glue, I would say, is going to work quite well in a joint. This one here. Let's bring this camera down a bit. There you go. Sorry about that. Would work quite well in a joint, as long as it's not too gappy. Although it is a gap-filling adhesive, so you have to, you have to make your mind up on that one. I'd say what it would be really good for if you're doing any framing work for exterior, because this is going to be 100% waterproof. Yeah. Not water, but nothing's really waterproof, it's water resistant. But the water resistance of this is going to be very good on the PU glues. And I can see so many applications for this, even in boat building and stuff like that. If you put the hog in and you're gluing up your boards to the hog, you'll seal them at the same time, because this will seal the joint. So in woodwork out as wooden boat building, I would say this would be pretty darn flippin' excellent. And I'm making the boat very soon, so I'm going to use that. Now, my next glue that I used was this Cascamite powdered resin wood glue, which is, I have to admit, is my go-to glue. I've been using this stuff for donkey's years. I stopped for about a couple of years because it went a bit rubbish. But it's been bought out by Eureka, or at least they've got the branding for it, and they've reformulated it how it was before. And I have to admit, since I've been using it again, it's brilliant. And they sent me some more over as well. So, I don't know if you hear that noise in the background. It's my wife, she's loading wood up. It's my job. She's stacking the wood up in the wood shed. So anyway, so that is my go-to glue is Cascamite. I've been using it for a very long time for all sorts of purposes, even sealing surfaces, because you can use it as a finish as well. Not a shiny finish, but like a sanding sealer type finish. Now, I was a little bit disappointed in this test. It was the worst performing glue in this test. I was quite shocked. I know it's mixed using water, and the water will evaporate and it will shrink. So I was a little bit disappointed. But when I do joints, it always seems to be the best. So maybe because it's exposed to more air, the water's evaporated off much faster and it shrunk much quicker. So the chemical reaction didn't actually wasn't given a chance, because it's been quite a nice day as well. I put it outside, you see. So if I put this down here, the deflection in here is using this vernier, put it in the hole. It's literally 4 millimeters in a 5 millimeter hole. So that's shrunk by, I don't know what the math is on that, or maths, but that's shrunk quite a bit. Now on the PVA, right, so I was a little bit disappointed in the Cascamite, but saying that, when I use it in my joints, it's brilliant. So anyway, put that to one side for a second. This stuff, D3, we've all heard of D3, your woodworking glue, PVA glues, and they do all shrink, we know they do. And one of the things I've disliked about PVAs in the past is the fact that they've always been rather soft, a bit rubbery, yeah? So when they dry, they end up being a bit like this. This one is this PVA here. It's just a basic, interior grade PVA wood glue. Strong, it's strong enough, but it's not brilliant. And same with this Patex here, which is actually a D3. Both of them are quite flexible. Like, as you can see there, there's a bit of this dribbled inside of the actual bowl, and it is quite flexible. Now, I have to admit, that's not really what you want in a joint. because it could be squeezed, it could, you know, if the joint's a bit slack, that is, again, same problems you might have with this glue. But the shrinkage of this D3 by Eureka Wood Stick PVA D3 wood glue, let's have a look at that one, because I'm quite impressed. As you can see, it's nowhere near the shrinkage. It's 24 hours drying time, this is, so that. And that one is 2 millimeters. That has shrunk half as much in the deflection as the Cascamite powdered resin wood glue. Now, if I mix the Cascamite thicker for this purpose, obviously it's not going to shrink as far, but I've just done it as I would do a glue if I was using it in a joint. So I mixed it so I could, you know, as if I was to make, you know, glue the joint together, woodworking joint. So that one, the D3, actually shrank much less. But then I thought to myself, what about the hardness? So we don't know about the PU glue. It's actually quite soft. I can stick this brad hole in it, no trouble whatsoever. Now the D3 was actually quite hard. That surprised me, because PVA glues are never usually hard. They're rubbery. They're bouncy. Just like that little bit I just showed you. It's just soft, you know. A little bit here, let's put it on there. I'll show you. That's that bit D3 there. And that. Yeah, it's dead sand, but that one, it's harder. So for a joint, this D3 by Eureka, I reckon it'd be blooming darn good. Because the reason why I say that is because you don't want compression, you see, in the joint. Because if you've got leverage in the joint, say if it's a mortise and tenon joint, and there's the tenon's going into the mortise, and it's doing that all the time, it's going to try and squash the glue. If it can't squash the glue, well then it's not going to compress, and then you're going to the joint is less likely to give up. Now, that's quite hard. I don't actually think the Cascamite is actually even fully gone off yet, because if it's some Cascamite here that I mixed, this piece here, which is actually the Cascamite that I put in this hole, that's the bit that's in the bottom of the pot. As you can see, that's really hard and brittle. Yeah, but it might be because that was 5 millimeters thick or deep, and it hasn't had enough time to actually go off. And the reason why I say that is because it feels a little bit soft. I can mark it. I shouldn't be able to mark it. I think that needs more time to go off. But that means it's going to shrink even further. That really surprised me. I did not expect that. So, you have to make your own mind up what you're going to use. Now, if you want something that's an all-rounder, I would say use this one, which happens to be the PVA D3. I'm really impressed with that. And I might do a similar test for this with the other one. They do a fast scrap, I could have done it with this actually. They do a 10-minute fast grab, bonds in 10 minutes, they say. I might try a similar test with that sort of shrinkage, so that was compared with this D3, this PVA here. So we'll see. Anyway, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on that. So please leave a comment in the comments down below. But also boot the old like button. But I just find this kind of, you know, yeah, interesting. I can't believe that. I'm really shocked. I'm actually shocked. This D3 here is probably one of the best D3s I've had. Yeah, PVA glues I've had. That I've never had a PVA glue shrink this little. Yeah. Now, wood filler. If you're using it for wood filler, you don't want shrinkage, do you? So maybe that one, if you could put some sawdust with it, that'll shrink even less. Maybe that would work quite well as a filler. But to be fair, that I would still probably use the Cascamite, because I know, as you saw from this very brittle Cascamite here, it's actually really hard, which means it'll sand well. But the other thing you have to bear in mind is obviously your health, because the Cascamite is urea formaldehyde, which is a carcinogen, so you'll make sure you wear a mask. You should wear a mask anyway, but there you go. All right, let's just cut through this, just before I go. I'll just sort of see how airy it is. It cuts off really easy, yep. You see that in there? It's full of little holes. Also, inside the glue, on the outside of that was firm. Inside the PU glue is soft. Now remember, that's an open space. It's not within a joint. So in a joint it might be different, because if it's got nowhere to go, it'll compress. Yeah, as it expands, it's got the bubbles will be much smaller and they'll be much tighter, so it'll be more dense. So I'm going to do a test of that in a joint as well. But yeah, so far so good. Anyway, you tell me what you think. What is your go-to wood glue? Is it, well, Type Bond, for instance, maybe. It's quite a popular glue. Gorilla Glue, maybe. That's another popular glue. Or would you consider any of these Eureka glues? Because so far, I'm actually really impressed. Some are better than others, but there you go. Anyway, you tell me. Please leave it in the comments down below. Ta-ta. Oh, boot the old like button.